Being a band director has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. But even on the good days, let's face it, being an educator isn't always easy. And there's no way I could have made it this far without the great advice, words of encouragement, and at times the tough love of some really wonderful mentors. If you find yourself needing those same things, or you just want to learn some strategies that will help you become a more effective music teacher, then you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Band Office. Hi there, I'm your host Andrew Jemison, and on this episode of the Band Office, we'll be discussing classroom management in the middle school band room and how to establish procedures in the classroom that will foster great rehearsals and set you and your students up for success. Joining us today is Mr. Justin McCrary, former North Carolina Middle School Band Director with Davie County Schools and current DMA candidate at West Virginia University, and Miss Tina Robinett, one half of the amazing duo of band directors at Asheville Middle School in Asheville, North Carolina. Thanks for being here, and welcome to the Band Office.
Hello, thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Well, let's start with some introductions. Tina, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I grew up mostly in Pennsylvania, central Pennsylvania, and I went to Penn State University for my undergraduate and received a Bachelor of Science in Music Education at Penn State, was in the blue band there for all 4 years. Great experience. And then I'm also, fun fact, a scuba diver. So when I graduated, I wanted to move somewhere where I could still be within driving distance of my parents, but kind of start on my own. And scuba diving was a bonus. So I found a job at the beach in North Carolina. So I started teaching at Moyock Middle School in Currituck County, North Carolina. And then I taught there for 3 years, and a different podcast story, ended up moving up to the high school. So then I taught at Currituck High School for 4 years, and then needed just a change of pace. The beach is lovely during beach time, but on the off season, it is kind of a sad place to be. So my husband and I moved to Greenville, North Carolina, where East Carolina University is, and I taught at Epps Middle School. For 10 years. I was there for 10 years. And while I taught there, I also got my master's in school administration from East Carolina University. And then my good friend, Anna Bullock, was teaching also in Greenville at a sister middle school there. We both fed the same high school. And she moved out west. Her husband got a job at Western Carolina University. And so she got a job out here and called me when there was an opening as her teammate at Asheville Middle School. There are 2 of us here, and said, Tina, you got to come out here. It's awesome here. The people are great here. The kids are great. Just a lot of opportunity to grow as an educator, do great things with our band. So I said, okay. So this is my 2nd year here at Asheville Middle School and my 19th year teaching. We're going to take over the world.
Nice. All right. Justin, if you would share a little bit about where life's journey has taken you.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Dobson, North Carolina, which is near Mount Airy, North Carolina, which is Andy Griffith's hometown, so Mayberry. I attended App State, Appalachian State University. Student taught in the fall of '09 with Matt Talbert at Haynes, and then I long-term subbed there during the spring of 2010. After that, I worked at Sea Park Music for a year. Then I got a job at Thomasville Middle School teaching band and chorus. And then I moved to Davie County to South Davie Middle School, where I spent 9 great years with some really incredible people. During that time, I obtained National Board Teaching Certification in 2018. And after that finished, I decided to get my music education master's degree from Ohio University and finished that up in 2019, or started in 2019, finished in 2020. And then from conversations from that experience and whatnot, I decided to pursue a DMA in conducting, and that's where I started at West Virginia University in 2021, and I'm currently about to wrap up my 2nd year of that degree.
Very good. Well, thank you both for being here again, and we are excited to have you on the show. Again, our topic today is classroom management and how to establish those ever so important classroom procedures that really set up the expectations you have for your students and help them learn how to rehearse. So let's start at the very beginning and take just a moment to walk through the first day of school, the first week of school, and just tell our listeners a little bit about what that's like for you in your classroom. Justin, why don't we start with you?
Sure. For me, I would always take the probably first week or so to teach procedures. We would rehearse procedures, handbook and contract review, calendar distribution, merchandise forms, locker assignments, all the background things that need to be done, making sure they have all their materials taken care of, assigning school and instruments, contracts that goes with those, work to make sure the beginners had an instrument purchased or rented. We really didn't start playing for a while with most groups until after that first week. And so it was all nuts and bolts and procedures and rehearsing those things um, as needed to be done for that first week or so.
Tina, what does that look like for you?
So similarly, the first day is, it's always fun for the returning students because they haven't seen their friends all summer. And one of the things I like about band is how social it is. And so they get to just kind of reunite with people. Sixth grade is kind of all new, and we do a summer camp here. So it's a great time for those kids to kind of meet or see their friends that they've had from before. So the first day is always fun. The whole week, yes, I feel like this whole podcast is on classroom management, and I really think that the classroom management part is important. It's all about relationships, and so I feel like that whole first week is just reestablishing and building good relationships. Of course, there's all that technical work to do, signing instruments and lockers and going over the handbook and expectations. And, what Justin said is really important. You have to rehearse the procedures. And when they don't do it well, they have to know why and go back and rehearse it the right way, how to come into the room, how to sit in your chair. And it seems so stupid, but it's super, super important for things to run smoothly later on down the road. So we also spend the first week playing some kind of get to know you games, and like whether it's Cahoots or the person in the middle or whatever you play, but just some games to kind of build those relationships. I also spend a lot of time making parent contact home for good reasons, like, oh, it's great to see you, hope you had a good summer, like all those things. And they all tie into what I feel is like the number one most important thing in education to be an effective educator is building relationships, appropriate and quality good relationships.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, I know there are different ways in which directors approach those first few weeks of school. Some spend several weeks doing music theory and then work their way into playing instruments slowly, while others jump right into playing instruments. And I've witnessed both strategies yield some successes, but I've also seen both at times not be so successful. And I really don't know that there is a right or wrong way to do it necessarily. But what are your personal opinions and philosophies as far as that is concerned?
So before I moved to Asheville, I never had a summer camp. And so we would not play the first day of school. I mean, I would tell them the whole first week, we just will not play. And so that is, you got to get instruments in the hands of people. You got to we do a rental meeting to pick up any kids who needed to still rent. And it's just not equitable when some kids start on their instrument and other kids don't have it. So in my years of experience, I feel like if you start too soon, it could be problematic in other ways, lots of like hidden meaning ways, right? So this quote, I don't even know who said it, but it stuck with me: go slow to go fast. So when you go slow in the beginning, really setting the foundations, and then you can go fast later. Here at Asheville, we have a summer camp, which it happens the week before school starts. So during that week, the sixth graders learn, like, these are the parts of my instrument. Here's how the reading music on the staff, and here's what cork grease is, and how do I buzz, and how do I assemble. So here at Asheville, we do play the first week of school, but it's more like mouthpiece buzzing and crowing at the right pitch, and doing that for like an entire week before we even like, if you can establish enough sharp on a clarinet mouthpiece barrel, then we can move on. But everybody in the room has to do that before we can move on. So there's still not a whole lot of playing, I wouldn't say. And I think those are my main reasons why.
Yeah, absolutely. I would probably echo the same exact sentiments as what Tina just said. It's the first week with eighth grade and I had my kids every day, 40 minutes a day. We didn't have a camp beforehand. The first week with them would be the procedures, get to know you, reminders, that kind of stuff. But then they would start to play pretty much at the end of that first week, because I did want them to go ahead and get back into playing again. But they still had plenty of review and whatnot beforehand. But I wanted to get them playing pretty soon. but at least a week before they started playing. 7th grade, similar to that, we would do more of a music theory review as well. I felt like for them, they need to go back and reteach and redo and relearn things that we had worked on last year, because as we know, kids, they don't always recall and retain. So it was really important to go back and review those things. Musical alphabet, staff line and space names, basic rhythm, reviewing our counting and pulsing, count, tap, and clap system, note names, fingerings, how to take care of your instrument. Then I also had small, short, little low stakes quizzes that they would do, that I would see where they were, what we need to go back and reteach. Any kind of musictheory.net, Music Racer, the music trainer websites, we would use those to review and to rehearse things and relearn. As a group, sometimes it was singular, sometimes it was in pairs. Any kind of fun kind of activity we could do to relearn and reteach, I'll try to incorporate those. 6th grade, very similar. They came in with no background really at all in anything. We did have some that were really well prepared by our elementary music teachers, thankfully. But for them, it would be an in-depth, here's how we do this. Here's the musical alphabet. We would learn that forwards and backwards, starting on different letters of the alphabet. So essentially, they were learning how to do scales without knowing what a scale was.
Yeah, that's great.
We would then introduce how that connects to the staff and note reading, rhythm building, rhythm teaching, teaching them the counting system, how we count, tap, and clap, and we pulse when we count, and how that works. Like the 7th graders, they had small little low stakes quizzes, even smaller chunks, just to, again, see what they were retaining or needing more review on.
Right.
They also used musictheory.net, Music Racer, those other websites to learn and retain, hopefully, a little bit better. Try to make it fun, try to make it engaging, while achieving the mastery of important concepts before the playing. And my thought on that was teach a lot of background fundamental things so they're familiar with that before we go to put the instrument in their hands. In 6th grade, that I felt like that was very important to get a level of knowledge established first. Here's how this works. Here's how what this is, and then we could say, okay, now we're going to put the instrument in your hands and do some things with that, and here's how this connects. Like you said, I've seen it done other ways too, but I felt like the beginning, just the fundamental introduction without instruments for a while, was just huge and really, really paid dividends in the long run.
It certainly did, yeah. You always had some fantastic groups at South Davie Middle School. So in discussing the procedures, would you go back at the end of the quarter or beginning of the quarter or beginning of the second semester and just go through maybe a refresher of all these things with your students?
Absolutely. Yeah, we would, even with 8th grade, like Tina said earlier, go back out in the hallway and do it again. And we would have to teach them and reinforce how to come in the room, how to sit, even with 7th and 8th grade. So I would absolutely do that again.
Yeah, and I know like little tips and tricks for people is maybe later in the podcast, but the biggest thing that I have found to be an effective educator is consistency. And so again, go slow to go fast. Like in the first week of school, if somebody's not sitting in their seat right, I'm not going on. Like we have to go back, and the whole class is going to go back and review. Somebody comes in the room wrong, go back and redo. So in the I would say first couple weeks of school, I do stop my instruction quite frequently to go back and reinforce consistently those expectations and procedures I have in the classroom. And I found that when I do that, I don't really have to do it again later, because they know all I have to do is, oh, do we have to go back and do that again? No, we don't. And then they, fall in line. That's all I have to say to keep the classroom engaged. I'm not off track, but I do, like, if I need to, whenever I need to, I do, the first day back, usually after a semester change, is a good time to do that, or just randomly throughout.
And I know, especially if you're a young teacher, first year teacher, sometimes that can be a little daunting to think, I've got to do that. The kids are going to hate it, yada, yada, yada. You've got to do it. I mean, you're the adult in the room. You got to make sure that you're getting what you want out of your students.
Yes.
And you can't be afraid to hold them accountable, because the majority of the students in the room are like, that knucklehead over there, you need to stop that mess. They don't like it. They want to do things the right way. Kids want to please you and do what you want of them. And so I think, like she said, it's absolutely, and you can't be afraid to do it.
Right.
You have to.
It's a good point. Kids really, I'm sure you've heard it 1,000 times from lots of different people, but they thrive in structure, in a structured, safe environment. And that's what we provide for them.
Yeah, there's been many times that I have witnessed teachers being frustrated at something, especially younger teachers, well, older teachers as well, and myself included. But one of the most valuable lessons that I have learned, and really most difficult lessons I have learned, I don't remember who told me this, but it's so important. If the students are not doing what you want them to do, if they're not meeting your expectations, then it's your fault.
Absolutely.
It's because you haven't taught them the right way, or you haven't been consistent enough, or you haven't taken the time to make sure they understand that expectation. And it's super easy just to blame the students and place that on them, put the ball in their court, so to speak.
Yep.
And say, well, they're just being obnoxious. But it boils down to, really, did I teach it well, and was I consistent enough for it to stick with them? And that kind of goes along with the restorative practices approach. If a student doesn't know how to behave in your classroom, then it's your job as the teacher to teach them how to behave. When a child doesn't know how to ride a bicycle, we don't yell at them for not knowing how to ride a bicycle. We teach them how to ride a bicycle. When a child doesn't know how to tie their shoes, we don't put them in a corner and make them fill out a timeout sheet. We teach them how to do it. And the same concept has to apply in your classroom.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's they're going to know what you teach them, or they're not going to know what you don't teach them. And that's why it's so huge and important in middle school to get after these concepts and get it going, because if you don't teach it in middle school, too often it's hard to teach it in high school and retrain once they've learned bad habits in middle school.
Yeah, two things. First, the restorative practices piece, you said it's really important that students see how their behaviors affect others. And what other way to show that than band, right? Like if you don't know your part in your music, it affects others. If you can't sit in your chair correctly, it affects others. So that's a huge restorative practice piece. And the other thing is, I mentioned earlier, I taught high school, and I don't know if it's my controlling personality or whatever, but when you teach high school and kids come to you already with a sense of what they think they know or don't know, and it's a lot harder. So teaching sixth grade band to me is my jam, because that is, I just assume they know nothing. And that's my best advice for a first year teacher is they don't know anything unless you teach them. Assume they don't know how to sit in a chair. Assume they don't know how to enter your room. You teach them all of those. To your point, Andrew, that's a really good point, right? Like if they don't know it, it's because we didn't teach them.
Right. Well, let's move on to our next question here. One way that we as teachers can actually sabotage ourselves and sabotage our classes is by not pacing a lesson properly or pacing a class properly. And I also see this sometimes get blamed on students, that the student behavior is not good, when in fact it's really the pacing of the lesson or the pacing of the teacher that's allowing opportunities for students to act out or misbehave. So what are your strategies for good pacing in the band classroom?
I think for me, knowing the content, know what you want to teach and when you need to teach it. And also when it's okay to move on, when it's not okay to move on. That just comes with time. You've got to have a curriculum for each grade level. By quarter, I think, is best. Of course, you can break it down by week if you want to as well, but I just kind of broke mine down by quarter. And then I had to go into my lessons with some sort of plan. And I don't mean a 6-point detailed bulleted 8-page step-by-step plan, but something that you've thought about, written down, that you have looked long-term as what is my end result, and you have planned to get to that. I think also is knowing how to anticipate potential issues in the material that you're teaching. What partials are flat? What rhythm issues are they going to have with this area? Why is that woodwind thing not happening? Well, it's because it's an odd fingering technique. How to fix balance issues, and then having several ways to work around those problems. Also, with pacing when you're teaching, you got to read the room. Students will tell you typically if they know what's going on or not. Also, short little questions throughout, questioning and just seeing where they are, seeing how they're responding. Again, reading the room and seeing what they are demonstrating to you having known or not known. Also, something I didn't do enough of, which I wish I would have done more of, was recording classes. You can record your teaching and go back and review. You catch so many things, so much information that you typically might miss when you're teaching. You can catch some behavior issues. You can catch some of your pacing issues. Did I really set it the right way? Was I specific enough? Was I too specific? The recording of your classes is huge as well.
Yeah, pacing is a huge, huge, huge issue. I mean, with a lot of student teachers I've had, it's really hard. And effective teachers have good, fast pacing. And so how do you do that, right? And it's not really something we're taught in school. So you watch good teachers do it and you try things. For me, it's the same thing as Justin said, that you have to be prepared. You have to plan. And even myself now, I mean, I've been teaching for 19 years. I will wing it often. And I have found those are not my best lessons, when the lesson is over and the kids leave and I'm like, okay, what did we do today? Well, it could have been a whole heck of a lot more had I been more prepared, had I planned that lesson out, like 10 minutes, we do this and then we move on. And when you're a first year teacher or new teacher, or maybe you're just trying to be better, I always keep like a notebook on my stand and write down the things. So like maybe I don't know, hey, we're not getting measure 12 and I have no idea why, or number 40 in the book or whatever. I don't know why. So your pacing is important. I mean, you're left with a choice. Do I like hammer this right now? Do I like fix it? It's in the flute section. Do I like everybody else sit quietly while I figure out what's going on in the flute section or not? And I mean, with more experience, you'll be able to make that judgment call. But in the beginning, I choose not to. I mean, the pacing of the class is more important. So I'll take that notebook and I'll write down, hey, measure 12 in the flutes, rough, question mark, no idea why. I'll research in my planning how I'm going to address that tomorrow, and we'll come back to that tomorrow. So just moving on with things, letting some things go, knowing what to let go and what not to let go is always really hard. Work with your teacher, the people around you best. Recording lessons is great. Then you can sit there and say, hey, would I want to be a student in this class? Well, if I were playing trumpet in this class, would I want to be here, or, and that's always a good way too. But it's really just being prepared and moving quickly. And it's not talking fast necessarily, but moving quickly from one activity to another activity. No downtime in there, or, that's idle hands or the devil's workshop, right? Like the kids are going to do what they can get away with. So if it takes you 5 minutes to transition from a piece, then they're going to use that 5 minutes in a way that's good for them. Another huge thing is formative assessments. There are thousands of ways to do quick formative assessments, right? Like on your hand, show me. 5 is I just was a boss on that, or 1 was I didn't even know where we were. Where were you? Thumbs up, thumbs down, right? A, B, A, B, you play, you listen. Now you play, you listen. A lot of times if you have red shoelaces, play. If you're wearing a hat, play. And just getting different groups to play and keep the pacing going. I know they need reps doing it, and I don't know what I'm hearing necessarily. So let's have the left half of the room play. If you're wearing shorts, play, and then I can move around the room a little bit and listen to just the smaller group. And that helps me be able to hear in a more individualized way. And then I'll run back to my notebook and be like, trumpet 2s need help in measure 5, whatever. And then again, during my planning, go back, like Justin said, what are some of the pitfalls? Why are they missing that? Why is F sharp in this measure so tricky for them? And then write down all the things I'm going to do to plan for the next lesson. And that's where I would start. I mean, there's a whole bucket of things, but those are just some. But keep it moving.
Absolutely. And I think also going back to the point of getting off the podium, thinking, we're sitting in college band learning how to play. The directors are always on the podium. So we see them always on the podium. But for middle school, especially beginners, we got to get off the podium. And I found if we're off the podium and circulating around the room and getting beside of them and seeing what's going on, they also tend to have less issues in terms of behavior because you're out there beside of them. They see you around the room. They don't know where you're going to be going next. It also allows you to see what's going on in a little more a closer kind of perspective with embouchures and hand positions, and you can hear a little bit better when you get closer to them. So I think that's also another part that I made use of, especially with beginners, is just to circulate the room, get off the pedestal, and don't be afraid to get beside of them and listen and teach from the actual floor, from the back of the room as well.
Yeah. That's great. Now, Justin, you know this. Tina, you may not, and certainly our listeners probably don't, but I did teach middle school band my first year of teaching, and then taught high school for the remainder, and now I'm fortunate enough to be back in the middle school classroom for a portion of the day. And man, I have forgotten just how many questions that middle school kids ask, whether it's pertaining to band class or not. And I have witnessed our middle school teacher, and I'm guilty of this myself, of kind of ignoring a kid's question. I think we all have done that from time to time in order to keep the class pace moving. But I think you have to make sure that you have built the relationships with students so that they know that you're not just being rude to them, you're not just being a jerk. Early on in my career, we had a really good American Sign Language class at the school where I was teaching, and I stole from her a strategy of teaching the students the sign language for toilet and sign language for water. And if at any point in the day my students have to go to the bathroom or have to get water, they show me those two signs or whichever sign they need. And I don't say anything. They don't say anything. I may wink at them. I may nod. I may smile. And they know that that is an acknowledgement for them. It's okay to go to the restroom. It's okay to go get water. They don't stop and interrupt class and ask me, can I go to the restroom? It's a time saver, and it's just a strategy that helps to keep our class going.
I think that goes back to the building relationships piece too.
Yeah.
I often say, I see your hand and I'm ignoring you on purpose. Ask me at the end of class or whatever.
Right. Well, let's move on to our next question. Are there incentives that you use in your classrooms to aid in the building of that positive behavior and those positive expectations that you want your students to learn?
Yeah, middle school kids are highly motivated by positive reinforcement. They will do anything for a Jolly Rancher. I'm sure you know that. Anything. They will do anything for a Jolly Rancher. So sometimes it's just bribery, straight sugar bribery. Here's your Jolly Rancher. Seriously, they will also do anything to be able to run warm-ups at the beginning of class. And sometimes, like on Fridays, I would allow that, right? Like Fridays, student-led warm-ups, and however you want to incentivize them, whoever played their part the best, whoever sat in their seat the quietest, whoever turned in their practice record, whatever it is you want to do, they can lead warm-ups on Friday. That's always super good. A lot of times, this is also one of those age-old adages that like old teachers say, but it's so true, like praise in public and criticize in private. Sometimes it's just oh my gosh, Johnny, today you were amazing. And just the over exaggerating pleasantness you have for them in front of the entire class can be hugely motivating to them too. But like there are little ways to do that in class, and then the big way on Fridays, and then a Jolly Rancher out the door. I mean, all of that positive. I'm going to call your mom today and tell her how awesome you were for me. And that goes a long way too.
Absolutely. Yeah. The candy, the positive praise, and like you said, calling home with positives. That's something that a lot of folks don't really do as much as we probably should, but I always try to do it at least once a week, twice a week. And parents are usually surprised when I call them and they're like, "Oh, what did little Johnny do now?" I'm like, "No, it's a positive phone call. It's a good thing." They're like, "I don't understand that." That's cool though. They liked it, and positive emails. They just really appreciated hearing positive things about their students. Otherwise, again, like we've said, relationships, knowing your students, being respectful to them, talking to them, getting to know them. The relationship part is huge. That to me kind of cut down on any other incentives I really had to use in terms of tangible things. Just working to build that culture of trust and respect, where they knew it was okay to make mistakes, and that if I redirect them or, like we said, ignore them, it's not a slam or an indication that I don't like them any less.
Right.
I think the positive daily interaction, getting to know them, being willing to listen, and those positive emails and phone calls home, combined with candy, you can't go wrong.
Well, the last question I have for you is, as band directors, we never want to lose a kid to another class. We want to keep band kids in our room. We have a special attachment to our students. And as a new director, sometimes it's hard to give consequences to students when things aren't going the way they should be going. So how do I impose a consequence without turning a kid completely off of band and making them want to quit? And should I worry about that?
Well, I think for me, it's a balancing act. I think for everybody, it's something that we have to learn and figure out how to do. Like talked about several times, the relationships are there, trust. Uh, Students don't know or don't care what you know until they know that you care. Uh, Consequences happen. It's part of our teaching. We have to teach the expectations and consequences that we covered in the handbook. Being firm, being fair, being consistent of those reminders. Students need constant reminders. Um, and we can't do it in a judgmental or attacking manner. We have to just simply be direct and state what's going on and redirect, give them chances. I think reminders are huge in the follow-ups of why they receive the consequence for the choices they're making, especially with beginners. That's huge. I found that the older students, 7th and 8th graders, by the time they got to that point, they knew the drill as they've learned from the mistakes of their peers. I think also with that was to love them up after you redirect, or if you have to call attention to things, love them up. Make sure they're okay. Make sure they understand that you do care for them and you're there for them, but there are certain ways things have to happen, and explain to them why it's that way. That tended to help for me quite a bit.
Yeah, I feel like having the punishment fit the crime, so to speak, right? Like the thing that's been most effective for me in teaching 6th grade band as a consequence is if you are doing something that you're not supposed to be doing, I make you just pack up your instrument. And you have to sit there without your instrument together and still pay attention. And if you're quiet for like 1 minute, then you can get it back out. And the fact that like they had to just pack it up is embarrassing a little bit, and it's a physical, tangible, immediate response to what they did wrong, and then they can earn it back. So if they're quiet for a minute, they can get it all back out and then continue on. So not like I'm gonna write you up and send you to the principal's office, which I don't think happens anymore, but because you played out of turn. So just letting the punishment fit the crime and make sure they know that. That's also something I practice. Like I'll say, hey, Susie, on purpose, play out a turn. And this is what would happen in class. Oh, okay, now you have to pack up your instrument. So practicing those consequences as well is important, making them meet the crime. And then what Justin said is hugely important too, is that don't hold a grudge. Like really don't hold a grudge. If a kid is bad or does something bad or says something they shouldn't do, then of course they have the consequence. But then we talk about it at the end of class and we repair that relationship and say, hey, it's not you. That was just a bad choice, and then tomorrow, nothing happened. We reset, we go back to zero. They have all the love that you can give them the next day. And that's how you move forward. It's all about those relationships. And when people have problems in their classroom, it's because they're not consistent with those expectations and that the consequences are not clear. And so it's not a positive environment. Right? Because they just don't know what to expect.
Very well said. That's absolutely right.
All right. And now it's time for questions from you, our listeners. This portion of our show is sponsored by Audish. Audish is a platform for managing any audition process from the classroom to a region or state event, from invitations, registration, billing, and messaging, all the way through the judging, scoring, tabulation, analysis, and wrap-up reports. Audish can help you have a successful audition process. For more information, check out their website at audish.app. That's audish.app. The Band Office is also sponsored by the North Carolina chapter of the National Band Association. If you're not a member of the National Band Association, well, you should be. By becoming a member, you'll receive subscriptions to the Instrumentalist Magazine, the NBA Journal, access to the NBA membership directory, access to teaching materials, mentors and mentor programs, and so much more. To join today, visit nationalbandassociation.org. All right, our question today comes from Caleb Lanning, a second-year teacher at Southwest Middle School in Onslow County, North Carolina. Caleb wants to know if you have any specific advice on how to manage the behavior of 7th graders and motivate 7th graders. He says they seem to be the most challenging age group to teach, and being back in the middle school classroom now, I happen to agree.
Yeah, I agree with Caleb. For me, I always found 7th grade was the most challenging group. Their brains are literally changing. Their focus issues. They have brain fog. Hormones are starting to rage. I had to refer to that as the 7th grade funk. And once I explained it to students, they're like, yeah, that makes sense. So that condition seems to be kind of a real thing for them. I think you really have to fake it some days. You got to dig deep to harness your inner goofiness. You can't be afraid just to get on their level, make them laugh. They are there to have fun. They got to learn, but they're there to have fun. And that year, I think, really needs some fun. Um, you have to be yourself, but we shouldn't take ourselves too seriously. We do need to joke around some, be playful. Um, Sometimes a relationship building opportunity and a joke session goes more and further than teaching a skill that day. Um, those relationships, like we talked about so much here, are huge. And I think sometimes that trumps uh, the musical lesson of the day. Sometimes they're kids, we're human. Sometimes they don't get to talk to their teachers. My wife has said several times that her kids at her school, teachers don't talk to them, and so they just want to talk sometimes. And that goes back to the relationships and the bonding, um, and just the need to have some fun. And I think after that, the growth and the retention of material will follow.
Yeah, it's a great question because they're seen as the middle child, the redheaded stepchild often, right? Like in sixth grade, they know they don't know anything, so they learn from everybody. And in eighth grade, they feel like they know everything, so they don't have to learn from anybody else, right? But in seventh grade, I think encouraging those peer relationships could be really helpful too. I found it really valuable. They could go help a sixth grader if they're a high flyer, I call them. So they could go help a sixth grader or come and help the sixth grade class or the flutes or something like that. And that really gives them a sense of worth and value and motivates them. Or if they're having trouble, then pair them with an eighth grader, and having a peer show them how much they don't know sometimes can trigger that as well and helps keep them motivated in different ways. Having seventh graders play with the eighth graders, whether it's in jazz band or something that they're doing after school, that also builds independent musicianships with the seventh graders, and it gives them a sense of worth and value. And then when they go back to their class, they can be the leaders and helps bring that positivity to the other students around them too. So it's tricky, but find ways to encourage them and use their peers.
Yeah, that's huge. The ownership part, that's major. If you can find ways to give them that ownership and um, things to do, that helps a lot too.
Well, my friends, we are drawing close to an end here, but before we leave, is there one bit of information, one lesson that you've learned from a mentor or from another teacher that you think would be the most important thing that you could share with new teachers, student teachers, or those looking to become band directors?
Yeah, there are a few big ones, but like the number one thing for me is to find your work-life balance. It's easy when you're a new teacher and maybe you don't have, this is going to sound bad, maybe you don't have that stimulating of a personal life, right? Like it's easy to throw yourself into the job and to do everything for the kids after school and spend all your time planning. Those first few years are rough because you don't have things made for you. So you have to constantly make your worksheets. And if you don't know the trumpet fingerings, I was playing the trumpet before I taught the lesson the next day, or, so just find your work-life balance and leave it alone. I feel like in this day and age, I still do not have my work email tied to my phone, and I refuse to answer my work emails outside of school hours. We're teachers. We don't get paid to do that. So don't do it, right? And like if you start doing things after school for people, they will take advantage of you, and it will be like that your whole career. So start early finding that work-life balance.
That's a great tidbit there. It's just band. It's an awesome, amazing thing that we're doing, but it's just band. We got to have that balance in our life. I think for me, that's a big one, but I think also calm down, slow down, and be gracious to yourself. I'm still my own worst critic about this, but I've gotten better. It takes time. We gotta we gotta figure out ourselves, figure out what we want to do, figure out our students. It takes time to learn to teach kids effectively. Find those in your area and outside of your area that are the master teachers who accomplish the things that we want to do at a high level. If I wanted to be the best band director, I would try, or I did try to surround myself with those that were doing things really well. Form relationships with them, hung out with them, be willing and open to their criticism. Most folks in the trade don't want you to fail. They're more than willing to help. And bringing in those quality folks to listen and watch us rehearse and give us feedback is huge. And then to be open to that feedback and willing to accept their comments and observations, which might contradict with what we perceive as what we are doing. Things may sting a little bit, but we have to put our ego aside and learn. But I think just the calming down and being gracious and reaching out to those folks who are the top teachers and the top leaders of what we're doing and learning from them really helped me tremendously.
Yeah, sorry about that. I just wanted to add, don't take anything personally either. Like if the kid quits band or if they yell at you or if they cry. I mean, I don't know if you already said that, Justin, but just not taking anything personally will be like do wonders for your psyche. It's not you. It just may not be right for the kid or you're still learning, and don't take things personally.
Absolutely. Yeah. We got to be careful about wearing the heart on the sleeve sometimes. And they're just kids. They make mistakes. They say stuff they don't mean sometimes because there's some things going on behind the scenes sometimes that are causing those things. And that's major. So don't take it personally. They're just kids.
Wow. Such great advice. Thank you both for sharing with us. And thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
My door's always open. Will share all my knowledge, whatever I have, with anybody else. So keep up the good fight.
Likewise. Thanks again. Yeah, absolutely. And always here to help answer questions and be of assistance if needed. So thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us here on the Band Office. We truly hope that you find your way back to us each week to find words of advice and encouragement that will help you have a more successful time in your classroom as a music educator. You can find the Band Office on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and the Anchor app. This podcast is sponsored by the North Carolina chapter of the National Band Association. Theme music is written and performed by the Westerlies.